Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. And today we're doing things a little differently. We're kind of time traveling, you could say, using a travel journal as our source material to explore a 2-day trip through Nara, Japan. And it's pretty awesome. You know, it's full of observations, historical tidbits, and even some unexpected culinary adventures. I think you're going to love it.
I think so too. You know, it's always fascinating to experience a new place through someone else's eyes. And this traveler definitely has a knack for noticing those little details that really bring a journey to life. Plus, they've got a packed itinerary, so it should be fun to follow along.
Yeah, exactly. Like right off the bat, they talk about the sheer number of pigeons at the Kyoto train station. I mean, it's those small, everyday observations that, really ground you in a new environment, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It kind of makes you feel like you're right there with them, and then boom, 38 minutes later, they're in Nara, eager to catch a glimpse of the Kofukuji 5-storied pagoda before it ggets encased in scaffolding for repairs.
Yeah, it makes you realize those fleeting opportunities to see things, right?
Yeah.
You never know when something's going to be under construction or closed for renovation.
It does. It's a good reminder that even those seemingly permanent structures are subject to the passage of time.
Yeah, very true. Speaking of savvy decisions, I was really intrigued by their choice to have lunch at the Nara Prefecture Government Building. Not your typical tourist spot, right?
Not at all. But they mention affordable ramen and amazing views of that same Kofukuji pagoda from the rooftop observatory, so it sounds like a win-win.
Definitely a hidden gem.
Yeah.
Okay, so after fueling up, it's off the Kofukuji Temple, a place steeped in history and legend, and here's where things get really interesting. They mention a connection to a famous Japanese folktale called the Deer Lawsuit by the Rakugo storyteller Katsura Beicho. Now, I'll admit, I'm not super familiar with Rakugo. What's the deal with that?
Well, think of Rakugo as a kind of comedic storytelling, often with a bit of social commentary woven in. The Deer Lawsuit, in particular, uses humor to poke fun at bureaucracy and blind obedience.
Ah, so a satirical take on authority.
Yeah.
I like it. But how does this folktale tie into Kofukuji?
Well, the story revolves around a boy who accidentally kills a sacred deer, a pretty serious offense in Nara, where deer are considered messengers of the gods. And the folktale highlights all the absurd lengths the authorities go to investigate and try the case. And get this, our traveler actually visits the legendary Sanjaku stone-filled tomb at Kofukuji, which is said to be the burial site of that very boy from the story.
No way. So there's a direct link from this humorous tale to an actual historical site.
That's pretty cool, huh? Talk about blurring the lines between fiction and reality.
Exactly. It adds a whole other dimension to the visit.
For sure. So what else catches their eye at Kofukuji?
Well, they stroll around Sorosawa Pond, taking in the views of the pagoda, but sadly a few buildings were closed for renovation, which seems to be a bit of a recurring theme on this trip.
Yeah, the travel inevitability of renovations, right? You never know what you're going to find.
That's true. It keeps things interesting. Okay, on to the next stop then. They head to the Grand Kasuga Taikisha Shrine. What can you tell us about that?
Well, they're clearly impressed by the massive wooden torii gate at the entrance, and the shrine is dedicated to the deity Takemikazuchi. There's also mention of an appearance stone, but they don't go into much detail about it.
An appearance stone? Now that's intriguing. It's funny how even with a carefully planned itinerary, there's always room for those little mysteries that pop up.
Absolutely. It's those unexpected discoveries that often make a trip memorable.
Okay, this next part, I have to say I chuckled when I read it. Apparently our traveler was struck with some pretty bad leg cramps and decided to take a coffee break. But this wasn't just any ordinary coffee stop, was it?
It wasn't. In a stroke of pure luck, they stumbled upon the former resting place of Emperor Meiji, complete with a historic carriage shed. Talk about a fortuitous coincidence.
Right. It really highlights how sometimes those unplanned detours can lead to the most fascinating discoveries. I mean, who would have thought a simple coffee break would turn into a history lesson?
It's like a reminder to embrace those unexpected moments because you never know what you might find.
Totally. Okay, back to Kasuga Taisha. The traveler was just mesmerized by the thousands of stone and hanging lanterns there, and apparently no one has ever been able to count them accurately. It's like an inside joke. Tying back to that deer lawsuit we talked about earlier, where that very impossibility is part of the humor.
I love that. It's like they're seeing those lanterns through the lens of that folktale, imagining the sheer number and the humor surrounding them, and it just adds this richer, more layered experience to their visit.
Definitely. Okay, so Their initial plan was to end day one at Kasuga Taisha. But remember those exhibit closures we talked about? Well, it seems those actually freed up some time in their schedule.
True, but it meant missing out on climbing Wakakusa Mountain, which they had been looking forward to, especially since it was close to the annual grass burning event.
Ah, that's too bad. Maybe it's just another reason to go back someday, right?
Exactly. There's always a next time.
So instead of the mountain, they decide to head over to Tadaiji Temple, specifically the Negatsudo and Sengatsudo halls, which are the oldest buildings at Tadaiji. I bet those were pretty impressive.
I'm sure they were, and it really shows their adaptability as a traveler. They're not letting a few closures derail their plans. They're finding alternative ways to experience Nara's historical richness.
I like that attitude.
Ah.
All right. So by now, I'm guessing they've worked up quite an appetite. They were really determined to find a traditional Showa-era style place for dinner, hoping to get a taste of that era's atmosphere.
Yes, they were, but they did mention a slight regret about their final choice, so I'm curious to hear what they ended up having and why they felt that way.
Yeah, me too. I guess we'll have to wait and see what culinary delights await.
Indeed, stay tuned.
All right, folks, we'll be back soon to delve into their dinner experience and the rest of their jam-packed day one in Nara. Don't go anywhere. So did our traveler find that perfect Showa-era dining experience they were looking for?
Well, they did have sashimi and tempura and some grilled fish and a few other things with a nice selection of sake. It sounds delicious. But they did say they felt a little bit of regret, like it wasn't quite the authentic Showa-era atmosphere they had hoped for.
I get that sometimes the anticipation, the search for the perfect spot, is almost as fun as the meal itself. Maybe the place they chose was a bit too modern or, a little too polished.
Yeah, maybe. The Showa era in Japan, which was like from the late 1920s to the late 1980s, has this sort of nostalgic appeal for a lot of people. It was a time of, huge economic growth and big cultural shifts. And those feelings kind of get expressed in the ambiance, even the food in some of those old school establishments.
Yeah, it's like taking a step back in time, isn't it?
Exactly.
Well, even if the restaurant wasn't exactly what they pictured, I bet the food was still amazing.
Oh, I'm sure it was. And they even went for a drink at a nearby bar before ending the night with, a late night ramen stop.
Wow. Talk about packing it all in. That's some serious stamina. Okay, so that wraps up day one. What does day two have in store for us?
Well, day two kicks off with a visit to Tosha Daiji Temple, which has a pretty fascinating history. It was founded by a Chinese monk named Jian Zhen, and his journey to Japan is like a story of perseverance.
Oh yeah, I've heard a little about this. Didn't he face some pretty incredible obstacles to get there?
Oh, he did 5 failed attempts to cross the sea. He even lost his sight along the way, but he never gave up. What's so inspiring to me is that it wasn't just about reaching Japan, it was about what he brought with him.
Okay, so what was his mission? Why was it so important for him to get to Japan?
Well, Genzin was this highly respected Buddhist scholar, and he was invited to Japan to help establish proper Buddhist ordination. You see, at the time, there were some inconsistencies in how Buddhist practices were being transmitted, and his presence helped to kind of, formalize and solidify those teachings. So his arrival was a pretty pivotal moment in the history of Japanese Buddhism.
Wow, that really puts his journey into perspective. To go through all that hardship for the sake of sharing knowledge and making sure those teachings were passed down accurately. That's incredible. Okay, so after soaking in the history of Tosha Daiji, where does our traveler go next?
It's on to Yakushiji Temple. And it sounds like they had a little trouble navigating the grounds at first, feeling a bit lost, trying to find their way around. But even with that initial disorientation, you can really sense their admiration for the architecture.
I can totally relate to that. You get so excited to see everything you end up getting turned around.
Exactly. But they were especially captivated by the East Pagoda, which is often considered one of Japan's most beautiful. And get this, they were actually able to go inside the first floor of both the East and West pagodas during their visit.
Wow, what a cool opportunity. I'm adding that to my list for sure. They also noticed something kind of interesting about the height of the pagodas, didn't they?
Yeah.
Something about the newer West Pagoda seeming taller than the ancient East Pagoda.
Yeah, and it's not an optical illusion. The West Pagoda was actually built taller on purpose to account for 500 years of settling.
Wait, 500 years they were thinking that far ahead?
Right. The idea is that after centuries of the Earth's settling, the two pagodas will eventually be the same height. It's pretty amazing. It speaks to that long-term vision, that deep respect for both history and the future that you often see in Japanese architecture.
That's fascinating. It's like a slow-motion architectural magic trick unfolding over centuries. So after all that pagoda gazing, I'm sure it was time for lunch. Did they venture out to find some new culinary adventure.
Actually, it sounds like they were feeling a bit under the weather at that point, so they decided to stay closer to Yakushiji for lunch. They had a nice leisurely meal at a Western-style restaurant, taking their time to enjoy the view of the ducks on the pond.
Oh, that sounds lovely. A little rest, a peaceful view. Sometimes you need those moments of quiet contemplation just as much as you need the big busy sights.
Absolutely. But they weren't done exploring, yet feeling refreshed. They decided to see the Yakushiji pagodas from a different perspective across a large pond.
Oh, I bet that view was incredible. What do they say about it?
They described it as breathtaking with Wakakusa Mountain in the distance. They even talked about how that view might have looked centuries ago. You know, imagining people from different eras looking out at the same scenery.
That's so cool. That connection to the past is like they're stepping back in time.
Exactly. And the last stop on their Nara adventure was Heiho Palace, which was the imperial capital of Japan back in the day. It's a huge site full of history, you know, remnants of a bygone era.
Right, but they had already done so much. I mean, were they up for a full-blown exploration of Heiho Palace at that point?
It seems like fatigue had finally set in. They only mentioned taking a picture of the reconstructed Suzukuman Gate before heading back to Kyoto.
I can't blame them. Even the most enthusiastic traveler needs to recharge sometimes.
For sure, but of course, no trip would be complete without a little taste of the local specialties to take home right on their way back. They picked up some kaki no ha sushi, which is a Nara delicacy.
Kaki no ha sushi. I've never heard of that. What is it?
It's basically sushi that's wrapped in persimmon leaves, and the leaves give it a really unique flavor, and they act as a natural preservative too. It's been a regional specialty in Nara for centuries.
Wow, that sounds amazing. It's incredible how food can transport you back to a place, isn't it?
It really is. It's like taking a piece of the journey home with you.
Okay, so we've covered 2 full days of exploration through Nara. I'm so impressed with how much they managed to fit in, from grand temples to those hidden gems and even those unplanned detours. What stands out to you the most about their experience?
I think what impresses me most is their ability to find those little moments of serendipity and meaning, even in the midst of a busy schedule. You know, like stumbling upon Emperor Major's resting place. It wasn't planned, but it added so much to their trip.
Yes, and they really paid attention to the details, the things that revealed a deeper connection to history and culture, like that fascinating fact about the pagodas at Yakushiji. It's a reminder that there's always more than meets the eye. You know, there are stories and intentions woven in the very fabric of the places we visit.
Exactly. And I think that's such a valuable lesson for anyone who loves to travel. It's not just about seeing the sights, it's about really engaging with them. You know, asking questions, seeking out those hidden connections.
It's like they were on a quest for not just the what, but also the why behind everything they encountered.
Right. And I think that's what makes their travel journal so compelling. It's not just a list of places, it's a reflection on their experience, their observations, the connections they made along the way.
So we've journeyed through Nara through their eyes, experienced that blend of history and spirituality and those everyday moments that make a trip so memorable. What are your final thoughts on their adventure, and what can our listeners take away from it all? It's amazing, isn't it, how much travel has changed even just in the last few years?
Oh, absolutely. The way we plan trips, the way we experience new places, it's all so different now.
Yeah, like think about it. We have all this information at our fingertips, maps, reviews, translations, all on our phones.
I know, it's incredible that kind of access would have been unimaginable not too long ago. But sometimes I wonder if all that information can be a bit overwhelming. You know?
Overwhelming in what way?
Oh, I think sometimes we can get so caught up in planning the perfect itinerary, you know, making sure we see all the top sites that we forget to just be present and enjoy the moment. We're so busy trying to capture the perfect photo for Instagram that we miss out on actually experiencing the place.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I've definitely been guilty of that myself. It's like we're trying to create this perfect travel persona online instead of just being open to whatever comes our way.
Exactly. And I think our Nara traveler strikes a really nice balance. They obviously did their research, but they were also open to those spontaneous moments, those unplanned encounters that can lead to such unexpected discoveries.
Like that coffee break that turned into a historical find, or even getting a little lost at Yakushiji. Maybe that disorientation helped them see things they wouldn't have noticed otherwise.
Absolutely. Sometimes those detours, those moments when we veer off the planned path, are the ones that stay with us the most.
It's a good reminder to embrace the unexpected.
Yeah.
You know, be open to new experiences, even if they weren't part of the original plan.
Definitely. And to trust our own instincts and curiosity. Sometimes the best travel moments are the ones we stumble upon, the ones that weren't in any guidebook.
That's so true. This whole deep dive has really been a great reminder that travel is about so much more than just checking things off a list. It's about opening ourselves up to new perspectives, new ways of seeing the world.
Well said, and I think our Nara traveler, even through their journal, has really given us a glimpse of that.
Their journey with its mix of planning and those happy accidents has been really inspiring.
It really has. It reminds us that the most rewarding journeys are often the ones that take us beyond the tourist traps, deeper into the heart of a place where we can connect with its history, its culture, and its people on a more meaningful level.
That's a beautiful way to put it. So as we wrap up our Nara adventure, what would you say is the key takeaway for our listeners, especially those who are planning their own trips?
I'd say plan research, get excited about your destination, but also leave room for the unexpected. Embrace those moments of serendipity, follow your curiosity, and don't be afraid to get a little lost. You never know what treasures you might find along the way.
I love that. What a perfect note to end on. Well, to all our listeners out there, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Nara. We hope you've enjoyed this journey through history, spirituality, and the unexpected delights of exploration. And remember, whether you're traveling across the globe or just exploring your own neighborhood, keep your eyes open, your mind curious, and your heart ready for adventure.
Thank you for watching until the end. I hope you enjoyed it.